Good evening and welcome. This is the Rockdale County Board of Commissioners zoning public hearing. Thank you to everyone that came out tonight. We appreciate your attendance. This is January 23rd, 2025. It's 6 p.m. and I'd like to call the meeting to order. At this time, we'll have an approval of the agenda for tonight.
I move to approve the agenda.
Madam Chair, I second the motion.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. Next, I need an approval for the minutes of November 14th, 2024.
I move to approve the minutes of November 14th, 2024.
Madam Chair, I approve the motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I have a motion and a second, and that motion passes. Next, we'll move on to rules of procedure for public hearings.
And so tonight we will play the procedures.
Each speaker must sign their name to the appropriate zoning case sheet and fill out a public comment card to register their intent to speak prior to the start of this meeting. Each item of business shall be handled in the order that it appears on the agenda, unless upon motion of the board, the order is changed. A member of the county planning staff will present each item to the board and will provide recommendations made by both the planning staff and the Conyers-Rockdale Planning Commission for each item of business. The zoning applicant or the agent will have 10 minutes in which to make his or her presentation. Any portion of their 10 minutes may be reserved for rebuttal following the opposition to the application. After the applicant's presentation, all registered speakers who wish to speak in favor of the application will then be heard. They will also be limited to a total of 10 minutes. Once the applicant has made his or her presentation and the speakers in favor of the application have been heard, the secretary will then call upon the registered speakers in opposition to the application. The opposition shall likewise be limited to a total of 10 minutes. Once the public hearing portion is closed, no other speakers will be heard. As a reminder, speakers are to address the board and not the applicant or the audience and are expected to conduct themselves in an appropriate manner. The use of abusive or profane language shall not be allowed. No debate or argument between speakers shall be permitted. After all public comments have been heard, the board may elect to hold general discussion. However, no decisions will be rendered at this hearing. Decisions will be made at the next regularly scheduled Board of Commissioners meeting. Appeals shall be filed with the clerk of Rockdale County Superior Court within 30 days after the final decision by the Board of Commissioners.
That concludes the procedures.
Thank you. So item number 5, unfinished business.
So item number 5 is an application that we received about 2 years ago, and it is back in front of the board on remand. And so tonight we've got the attorney that is handling the application here to speak with you, since you have not had the privilege of hearing this particular item, and his name is Ted Meeker. So he'll come up.
Thank you.
Chair and Commissioners, good evening. My name is Ted Meeker.
Good evening.
It's good to be with you this evening. I serve as special counsel for Rockdale County, and one of the cases I've handled has been what I call the Shipping Properties case. This matter was heard by the board back in 2022 on an application for rezoning from the R1 designation to the light industrial zoning classification. The board at that time denied it. A lawsuit was filed. A trial was conducted last year in front of Judge Mumford, and at the conclusion of the trial, he issued an order finding that the current zoning classification is not constitutional and ordering the board to zone it in what the court called a constitutional manner. To give you a little bit more history about this, you can see the property. It has the pretty little star on your map. To the right, you'll see property that is already zoned light industrial, and that has been developed. If you will go back to the current aerial of the property, you can see that development. There, that is over to the right. If you would you go to the future land use map picture? To give you some idea of what's transpired since this was before the board in 2022, the parcel that you can't see completely, but it's that blue color, has been rezoned and is, I believe, going to be a data center. The property that is gold is also going to be a data center. Of course, the property fronts Sigmund Road, which has been widened in the last decade, and the entire map is showing this property to be exactly what the applicant sought, which was light industrial. The goal is to build a logistics warehouse on the property. Traffic studies were submitted in connection with the application, and I come before you a little bit concerned only because we have a court order that was not appealed by the county, and we're now under a duty to zone the property in what the court called as a constitutional manner. The remedy, if we don't do it, is an action for contempt by the other side, and that's a word that a lawyer never wants to speak with their clients about. So with this in mind, of course, I am here to answer any questions. The attorney who handled the application, Mr. Woody Galloway, is also present tonight. What was recommended back in 2022 was approval, because again, it was consistent with the future land use map, and there were certain conditions and those conditions haven't changed. They're before you for consideration next Tuesday, but for your consideration during the public hearing process this evening. Do you have any questions for me before I sit down and only come back up here if you ask me to do so?
I do. Can you talk about the conditions that were applied to this parcel?
Yes. Do we have those? Or? Okay. All right. One is that the site has to be developed in compliance with the limited industrial M1 zoning district. Those are the standards that would apply to every property that has that classification. The applicant has to provide a traffic impact study with the preliminary plat. So if it gets approved and they get to preliminary plat phase, they're going to have to redo the traffic study. Any recommendations for improvements will be required to be shown on the land disturbance permit. Additionally, as determined by the Rockdale County Department of Transportation, a new study may be required for the development. Any recommendations for improvements from any new study shall be required to be shown on the LDP. And lastly, the development has to comply with the parking requirements as required in section 222-2 of the UDO. In other words, they're going to be required to adhere to the standards that apply to other parcels, particularly with the type of development that's being proposed.
Okay. And no aesthetic requirements were made?
No.
Okay. And on the picture, as we have our next guest up, can we leave the parcel up that had the zoning map? No, go back to the orange and blue. That one. So on the front of the orange property, there's 4 parcels, and those are also zoned limited industrial?
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay. And do we know what businesses are there now?
I don't know
Okay.
if there are businesses there. Not yet. Are
Okay.
they currently residential structures that are located there? It looks like it from the aerial. Okay. But I'm assuming they were rezoned for the data center and are being.
The ones at the top left are, the ones at the bottom are going to be removed.
Okay. They're
Okay.
going to be assembled as a part of what's coming forward.
I see. Okay. All right. Very good. And can you tell us on this map where the closest housing units are, residential?
I believe, I don't know if we have a map big enough to.
If we can't clarify right now, there's probably somebody in the audience that's going to speak tonight
Okay.
that maybe could clarify if need
Okay.
be.
We
Okay.
could probably pull it up either through Q Public. Do any of the other maps go far enough back? Okay. Okay. If you could pull it up on Q Public while they're, and then I can come back up for other
Okay.
questions.
That would be great.
Anything else from the commissioners?
Yes, first off, what does a logistics warehouse entail? What does that mean?
I will let Mr. Galloway or his client answer.
Applicant is here.
Okay.
All right, so now we'll hear from the applicant from the Galloway Law Group.
I don't know if you're gonna be able to pull it out. I've got it.
Do you have something?
This has its own map on it, but I want intended to use it, so I can use this. Woody Galloway, on behalf of the applicant, 4062 Peachtree Road. The question was I think the first question was how close is the closest residential unit?
Right.
And you saw the bottom of the new data center property. That's
Correct.
a big property, and it's on the other side of that is my understanding of where the closest residential is. So it's substantially removed from this property.
Okay.
This is obviously along Sigmund Road, and all of that property to the south and on all sides is either data center or it's industrial.
Okay. All right, very good.
So if you look at this, the property, my understanding of what the data center is doing is they're buying property further to the northwest. And so they have the blue, and then they also are assembling property on the other side. The closest really single-family subdivision is further to the north.
Okay.
Your question was, what's a logistic facility?
Right, and what does, I mean,
This was proposed as a pretty small, it's a warehouse distribution type use, but because of the size of the property, it's only 12 acres. It's a relatively small warehouse distribution, much like what you see there. This was proposed to be a little bit bigger than, would you mind flipping to the,
Yeah, we can't see
I think
that.
it's, there you go. So this shows the warehouse distribution facility that was proposed. Whether it's exactly like that, we don't know, because this was under contract at the time. Unfortunately, we lost the contract as a result of the denial. The property owner had to go through that on his own, and is back before you tonight, hopefully to get the property sold.
so trucks are in and out.
They are, but we did a traffic study, and because of the size of the facility, it was very minor. The number of trips were extremely low, and as you saw in the conditions, we're required to do a new traffic study as we go through the process. So it was very.
And do the trucks back up to that north end or right there on Sigmund Road?
If you look at this plan, we originally proposed on Sigmund to have an access point. We amended that to only allow it on Farmer and Lester.
Okay, so where are the openings for the warehouses? Where will the trucks park?
That would be on the backside, on the northern side of the property.
Okay.
So your bays that are going to be
That's
open,
the word.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
They're going to be facing away from Sigmund Road.
Correct, and you
Okay.
can see where you've got truck parking along the northern boundary to the south. You can see that's car parking. In a facility this size, there's not a heavy incidence of trucks. It's a combination of office warehouse, basically.
Okay. So the other thing is that I've been by this property several times. And as we try to make Rockdale County more welcoming and more aesthetically beautiful, I would like to have a mural painted on that side that fronts Sigmund Road.
You have any objection to that? It's hard, yeah. I thought you were talking about on the backside.
No, the side that fronts Sigmund
front
Road,
Sigmund?
so that because it's an entryway into the county, and
The only concern I'd have on that, and it's probably it's in league with what you're trying to say, is they typically make the front look more office, and I wouldn't want to dictate a mural when you might have glass and make it look more like an office, than
okay.
so.
So maybe
an
we could
aesthetically
condition that
pleasing.
it's one or the other, that there's something that makes it look inviting.
Why don't we draft a condition, run it through
Okay.
planning, and so that y'all have something between now and the Board of Commissioners.
would be great.
That was not something that was raised
wasn't.
now in the vote. It wasn't raised
Right.
last time, so.
Yeah, I just don't want a big old blank.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
We have plenty of those already in the
Right.
county.
But you've seen nice ones too that have, even I do 1.5 million square foot buildings, and they have, the front end looks like an office. Because
Right.
they generally have 10 to 20% office. A development this size would tend to have towards the higher end of that would be office, and then they have the backside that would be the warehouse distribution. So I'll work with Jennifer and develop a condition.
Okay, yes, because I would really like to make that one of the conditions.
Okay. Any other questions for me?
Can you tell me the properties that surround this location, what are their zonings? We saw light industrial across the
Yeah, if you go back
street.
to that slide, all the purple is industrial. There is that one piece that is residential that's to the south, but that piece has not been developed forever, and it's on the land use plan for industrial. So the map on the left is the land use plan map, and it shows everything as being industrial, and then all the developed uses around it, and including some undeveloped uses, are industrial as well.
Okay, and do you know the vertical height of this building?
That changes, but by use, because
Okay.
some and Mr. Shippen is unlikely to develop this himself. At this point, you can understand the reticence of a buyer to come in and try to buy something that's in litigation. So we'll market this, and we'll work with, we made a commitment at the end of last year to work with economic development. We're glad to do that.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear
and
that.
Because we're only interested in marketing the property for its highest and best use. You've got,
Excellent.
and you got some great use. I mean, you got data centers. You can't put a data center on a 12-acre piece of property, though. But we're glad to work with other uses, and we spoke to the economic development folks at the end of last year, as we were asked to do by the former board, and we're glad to work with them, and they were great in terms of saying, we wish that this was available last year because we had this computer facility come through that needed a site that this would have been perfect for it, but that's the timing. So
Thank you very much.
thank you.
So, Madam Chair and Commissioners, we do have someone signed up to speak tonight, but they checked opposition and support. So, Carrie Tanner?
Okay. Carrie?
Good evening, everyone. I represent Acuity Brands
Very
at
good.
1400 Lester Road. At the moment, we're neither opposed or against this taking place. What we are concerned with, we were approached with the sewage that would be coming from this place. Would need to tie into the sewage that is on our property.
Okay.
So we don't know how that is going to affect our business or the private property. Is there some kind of fee or rental or sale or right away? We don't understand it at the moment. We understand that this is just being rezoned, but we have concerns, and we just want to find out the details before we jump on one side or the other.
Okay. And we can work with our water department to get clarification on that for you. Typically, they would have to abide by the same rules that everybody else does, which would be like a sewer tap-on fee and things like that. So we can get you in contact with the person in charge of that.
Okay, yeah, we just
Okay.
want to make sure, if it interrupts our business or
Yeah.
whatever.
We don't want that. You guys
Yeah,
are a
we
great
don't either.
partner and stakeholder in the community, so
Thank you.
thank you. All right, and
That
now
was the
we'll
only
move to
public
is that it?
comment we had, but did you want to reserve any of your time, Mr. Galloway? Are you good? Okay. You ready to close this one out then?
Yeah. Let's
Okay.
close that.
All right, so we will move to new business, and waiting for the agenda to come back up. All right, we have rezoning case 2024-28, and I'm going to hand this off to Ms. Tugman, who's going to present this item.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners, and congratulations and welcome.
Thank you.
So, as Director Rutledge said, our new item is case REZ 2024-28. The property address is 1929 Southwest Oglesby Bridge Road, and the applicant is Stephen Goodsell. The applicant is requesting to rezone 10 acres of a 44.76 acre parcel from AR, agricultural residential, to C1, local commercial, for a neighborhood commercial development. So to give you a little history on this, because both of you are new, the case was previously heard on November 7th, 2024, as a two-part case, where the applicant asked for the adjoining properties to be rezoned from AR to R1, single-family residential, and this parcel in question to be rezoned from agricultural residential to local commercial. The Planning Commission Board denied both requests at the time. However, the Board of Commissioners approved the residential aspect of it and referred the commercial part of it back to the Planning Commission Board. So on January 9th of this year, the PC Board heard the request again for just the commercial aspect and recommended approval with conditions. So to get into the case, that's the aerial map there, and then from the zoning, you see it's surrounded by residential and commercial properties. The portion of the property in question already has a future land use designation of neighborhood commercial. The site plan here shows exactly where the property is, and it's a concept of both the residential and the commercial development. And right where it's highlighted with that star, that's where we're talking about for the commercial part of it. So all internal and external reviews were received, and only the Transportation and Water Department had something to say, which the Transportation says they require the applicant to coordinate with GDOT on Georgia Highway 212 and recommend a decel lane for Oglesby Bridge Road. And the Water and Sewer Department stated that there is an existing water main along Georgia Highway 212 and along Oglesby Bridge Road, but there is no public wastewater. So going back, in summary, the applicant is requesting to rezone from agricultural residential to local commercial for a neighborhood commercial development, which is on a largely undeveloped 10-acre property. And the properties across the street are zoned C1 and are developed with a gas station, a print shop, a service repair garage, a restaurant, and a fitness center. And as such, a neighborhood commercial development would be suitable in view of the adjacent uses and would be compatible with the small commercial node that exists to the adjacent property. So with that in mind, staff recommended approval with 9 conditions, including some prohibited uses. But the Planning Commission recommended approval with amended conditions. Just to let you know, we did recommend in our recommendations that we include gas station. However, the Planning Commission Board recommended to remove that use And the Planning Commission Board also added number 10 as a recommended condition. I can read the conditions if you wish to.
Please do.
Yes. Okay. So number 1, the site shall be developed in general conformance with the submitted site plan and comply with the local commercial C1 zoning district if adopted. 2, the applicant shall provide a traffic impact study with the preliminary plat. Any recommendations for improvement shall be required to be shown on the land disturbance permit. Additionally, as determined by Rockdale County Department of Transportation, a new study may be required for the development. Any recommendations for improvements from any new studies shall be required to be shown on the LDP. 3, applicant must obtain environmental health approval during the preliminary plat phase. 4, provide a 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk along Oglesby Bridge Road Southwest and Georgia Highway 212 Southwest right-of-way. A strip of grass or other approved landscape material at least 4 feet in width shall separate sidewalks from adjacent curbs on public streets. 5, all grassed areas shall be sodded. 6, all utilities shall be placed underground. 7, natural vegetation shall remain on the property until the issuance of a development permit. 8, stormwater detention ponds shall be screened from view from adjacent residential properties. Screening plans shall be subject to review and approval by the Director of Planning and Development. 9, general commercial uses shall prohibit with the exception of the following uses. And these are vape stores, liquor stores, dollar type stores, or small box discount stores, and D, beauty supply stores. And the Planning Commission added, applicant shall add bollards to the front facade of all buildings. Number 10. So the applicant is here to present if you don't have any question for staff.
Oh, I do have a question. So the commercial space across the street, I know that they consistently have had a gas station, but there have been opening and closing of multiple businesses over there. So we haven't had consistent businesses other than the gas station. Can you talk about that area of zoning right there and about what's currently occupied? Do you know?
From previous meetings, we've been told, as you said, like a lot of these businesses are opening and closing, and it's not very consistent. But Mr. Goodsell had the information on as to which stores are still currently open, and this is one of the things he's used to say that the gas station should remain or shouldn't be one of the prohibited uses because there's another gas station across the street. So we were told that that gas station is still in business. I'm not totally sure of all the other businesses that are currently open presently, but those were the uses that have been there for a while.
Okay.
So that node is generally commercial business node.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anything else? Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Goodsell.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.
Welcome and welcome back, Commissioners and Madam Chair. Staff did a great job of summarizing where we've been on this. This was a component of a larger project. The residential portion of it was much more ambitious than what ended up getting approved, but we've continued to work on this 10-acre commercial component of the property. The original, the land use map, which is designated this as neighborhood commercial for something over 20 years, showed about 15 acres being that. And after talking with various retailers and folks that know more about this kind of a thing than I do, we determined that a 10-acre portion would be more appropriate for what we're looking for. So we're asking for the rezoning on 10 acres. Folks are concerned around the neighborhood as to what might go there. I want to make the point, first off, that I'm just about to jump in and develop 92 lots that will surround these stores. And it's obviously of great concern to us, the type and quality of stores that go into this thing. It would make no sense at all for us to shoot ourselves in the foot and put something in there that would be not conducive to being a good neighbor to a residential subdivision. As staff said, we're on an intersection where 2 of the 4 corners are already commercial. 9 parcels are zoned C1. None of these 9 parcels have any of the conditions that are mentioned in the staff's report or the planning conditions, the planning commission's recommendations. So I'm here to ask that we ask you to rezone this to C1 commercial. We're willing to work with some of the conditions, but those that we are not. Let's see. I'm visually challenged here, but I'm going to do my best. Thank you. We are fine with most of these conditions, but the exceptions. This is the exception. Yeah, there's vape stores we're fine with. Liquor stores we're okay with. The Planning Commission said dollar type stores, and I heard staff refer to it as
Small box resale.
okay. We disagree with that because that's just so vague. That could small box retail could describe 80% of what might go in there. I think a lot of people had a problem with a dollar store, and without further defining what it is we're outlawing, I think you've outlawed half of the permitted uses by saying a small. What is a small box? A smaller store that's retail. So we strongly object to that one. We also object to the condition of leaving out gas stations. We don't plan to do a gas station, but we do plan on having a store that would have gas. I think that it's important to the neighborhood and to the area to have a nice general store, if you will, a convenience store on the going home side of Highway 212. We believe that given all of the other 9 parcels in the intersection have the right to develop just that, and would if there was demand for another one, would make it, we want fair and equal treatment. If the other 9 folks can do a convenience store, we think we should be able to as well. We see no reason for a prohibition of that, and in fact, I think if I assume all 3 of you are at least passingly familiar with the intersection. Mm-hmm. The retail that's there right now is, let me put this in a charitable manner, not like what we would be building. In fact, I think with what we would do, the existing retail would be forced to raise its game, or they just might have to find someplace else to do their business, because what we would do would be a modern, well-designed, well-secured, well-lit place that would be, in my mind, an asset to the houses that we intend to build back there. We'd be crazy to do anything otherwise. So we object to the gas station, the small box retail, and Barber and Beauty. What's wrong with a Barber and Beauty shop? I don't understand what the objection is there. There's one across the street. I don't think it bothers anybody. We have no specific tenants lined up for this, but we certainly wouldn't want to exclude what would be, I think, a good neighborhood use. We are asking for approval of this, and we are asking that these conditions that we just mentioned be left out. And let me read my little disclaimer that denial of this rezoning or the inclusion of conditions not restraining surrounding properties are not accepted by me or Mr. C would violate our constitutional rights to equal protection and due process. If you have any questions, otherwise I'll reserve the rest of my time for rebuttal or whatever else.
I do have a question. I understood from the implied of 9D, the beauty supply stores, that's different than a beauty, like a hair
Apparently,
hairdresser.
there's some sort of stigma. Apparently, that they have a concentration of valuable and portable stuff that gets broken into and stolen a lot, and it attracts crime. Apparently, given that, we don't want one either. But it was news to me, and we wouldn't want to have anything that's going to be a detriment to anybody in the area.
So I know you've worked on this for a while. Why don't you tell us what your plans and contacts are for retailers in that area?
Okay. I am a residential developer working with Mr. C, the property owner, on this 145 acre area. I'm going to be the developer of the lots that I'll in turn sell to a builder who will build the homes. On the retail, Mr. C is actually had a number of businesses, from furniture retail to, yes, convenience stores. He was a part owner of a 60 convenience store chain. He's familiar with those, but I'm not sure he's ready to jump in and start into that business again right away. So we will probably find a partner or a customer to buy both the very corner that we would visualize for the convenience store, and the surrounding properties will be other types of retail. And, we can say what we won't have, not sure what we will have until the rubber meets the road and we hit the market. We'd be looking for things that would be appreciated in South Rockdale, because we're not there to build empty stores that are on top of empty stores across the street. Some people have said, gee, there's empty stores already. Why would you go do something over there? Well, we would do it differently. I think we would do it better, and I believe that we could succeed with what we're trying to do by doing a better job of retail than what's going on in the intersection right now.
Let me ask you, is both you and Mr. C have looked at this, in that area, I know that we have a deficit of senior housing available in Rockdale County. If there were opportunities to do something like that to serve the community, is that something that you have considered, even if it was a multi-story?
It would require sewer, and we don't have sewer. We worked for 3 years, really, to arrange for sewer for our more ambitious 240 lot potential development, and that got shot down in a hurry. I would love to do a senior development.
Okay.
I need it in the right place. Might need to be a little closer to highways, hospitals, and grocery stores. But yeah, I would love to be a part of a development like that. Whether this is the place, given the lack of sewer, I'm not sure. Frankly, I'm sad and disappointed that our more creative development ideas that were allowed by us bringing sewer in there were not appreciated. So,
and talk about that for a minute, because I think I've heard before at a previous hearing or maybe community meeting that sewer was discussed originally when there was more density.
That's right.
Okay.
As you're probably aware, the Honey Creek plant and the Scott Creek plant, aging existing sewer plants, are being taken offline, and those are on either side of this development.
Okay.
They're being taken offline as inefficient, relics of the past, and they're being changed to lift stations, so that the effluent will be lifted from Scott Creek up to Honey Creek plant, which is off of Troop Smith Road, and then from there to your new sewer facility up on Old Salem. If I have that all correct, and I think I do because we worked on this for a long time.
Yes.
We were going to do a force main to take our sewer to the Scott Creek plant, which is Scott Creek is the creek that goes through Meadowbrook, forms Meadowbrook's lakes, and comes underneath 212. We were going to go down 212 and tie into that, and that allowed us a whole lot more flexibility in development. Problem was, it's a long way to Scott Creek. It's probably 1.4 miles, and that's not cheap. $1.4 million, $1.6 million, something like that. Just to get started, and that's before we pay sewer tap fees and
Right.
and all this sort of thing. So we needed a certain density, and this is going to come up again and again, and I'm glad you asked this.
Right.
There's a lot of things that can't be done without the cost of doing them being spread out, and I would include higher levels of amenities, of sewer, of special uses like an active adult or different levels of adult housing. Those almost always require sewer, and the sewer requires density to pay for it.
Okay.
So we have been pushed to a very low density on the residential because the high density, the 240 units that it took to pay for the sewer was unacceptable. Frankly, I would have loved to have come in between, the 92 that we settled on and the 240. I would have loved to have done 175 units. You can't spread the $1.6 million cost of the tie into the sewer plant among that few lots and make it. And we're here to do this for a living.
Okay. Can you also talk about the fact that, there is a widely held thought that we have enough homes in Rockdale County and we have enough at the price point that you were looking at?
We don't have enough homes for anybody in Rockdale County. I buy numbers from a service, and they do this stuff by month supply. And a typical month supply in a healthy market is about 6 months worth of homes on the market. And they determine month supply by taking the number of houses that are available and dividing the velocity at which they've sold. The fact is, the month supply is really low, but the problem is a lot worse than that, because when you're dividing by the trailing 12 months of absorption, you're using a really low number of the amount of homes that's sold in the last 12 months isn't Rockdale's total potential.
Okay.
It's what Rockdale got left with because we haven't been able to develop anything because of lack of, Rockdale cut it into 3 pieces. The upper third is WP. We can't economically do anything in there.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to, don't need to. We understand what the Water Protection District's about. Then you got the middle part of the county, the older part, just on either side of I-20, and it's very highly developed. And then you got the southern part that's highly developed but still has a few spots in it. And there's not many places of any size to develop. In Mr. C's farm, Mr. C's had this farm for over 50 years. His property is one of, I could count on 2 hands, maybe on 1 hand, the numbers of properties in the south part of Rockdale that are still viable for development and are within reasonable or even semi-reasonable distance from sewer to be able to do something. We're not playing with a whole lot of stuff left. If you go south of the South River, people will point out there's land there, and I'll point out there's rock all over it. There's no sewer, and I'm not paying to get sewer through that rock, and y'all aren't either. So we're dealing with a finite number of pieces of property, and we need to be very careful and thoughtful in how we develop them. And we've got to make sure that we're taking care of the needs of the people in the county. I've talked to people who have lived in Rockdale County for years and years and years, and their children have graduated from college and gotten jobs and still live in the community, and they're moving 40 minutes out. They have nothing. And we always talk about the policeman, the firemen, the people that work at the county that don't make $1 million a year, and the cheapest house we can do now is pushing $500,000.
Right.
We can't build houses, workforce housing, not affordable housing where people think we're going to bring slums in. We can't bring houses that are affordable into this market without sewer and some density. And I think, though, the knee-jerk reaction from a lot of the public, there's the NIMBYs, and they think any density is bad density. But in an appropriate place, I'd ask them to think about where their children are going to live, where the nurse that's taking care of their father is going to live. Do they have to drive 45 minutes to get to where they can take care of you? We're not doing a good job as developers and as a county solving those problems at all. I wish I had a solution with this project. This project is going to be, we're only able to work the top end of our market now. And everybody says, oh, that's great. We have, that makes our houses worth more.
Right.
But, there will be enough because there's so little of anything. There'll be enough for us to do that. But it's disappointing that, sometimes folks that are living in houses that are not $500,000 will loudly demand that everything else that comes be that. And it's frustrating. So that's my short advertisement. Thank you.
If you had an alternative to this being being neighborhood commercial, so your ask today is to go from neighborhood commercial to C1.
No, it is neighborhood. I'm asking to go from AR to C1. C1 is underneath the land use map category neighborhood commercial. It's the lowest, least intensive, most appropriate for a neighborhood setting like this. Not, I think if you read the code, some of the racier things that might be allowable are in C2 and C3. And, we don't want vape stores. We don't want pawn shops. We don't want any of that. We're no C2, no C3. We don't.
But neighborhood commercial does give you some bandwidth to do some of the things that I think you've mentioned that
It
you wanna
does,
do.
and-
What does it not give you
What does neighborhood commercial not give us?
that C1 does?
No. Neighborhood commercial is the land use map category.
Okay.
We're trying to go from AR, which is agricultural,
Okay.
to C1 commercial. It allows us to put retail there that we
Okay.
can't put under AR.
Okay. All right. Understood. Thank you.
So I have a question on this condition number 10, where the applicant will add bollards to the front facades of all buildings.
That's something the planning commission came up with, and while I think it's a good idea and we're fine with that, we think those sorts of things are more appropriately handled in your code of, how you build a retail building
Agreed.
than as a zoning issue, but we're fine with that. So, fire away if that's what y'all want to
Okay,
put on
so
there.
Thank you.
I don't see anything in here that says you can't have a gas station.
The conditions requested by staff said that they would rather not have a gas station. Correct?
But, well, I know that, but I don't see it written down in these 10 conditions.
Mr. C. Hudson wanted to say a couple of things.
I'm Ben C. I've owned C Farms for 53 years. When I bought it, it was a dirt road, old Ridge Road was. I just want to talk about one of the things that some of the people in the community have been concerned about not wanting a gas station there. In 1988, myself, along with two partners that used to work with me for me in the retail business for 16 years, we bought a chain of convenience stores in Sandersville, Georgia, called Jet Food Stores of Georgia. Still very much operating today and a very successful operation. We spun off the 6 Savannah stores, took it down to 14 and started building it back. 19 years later, when I sold out my half of it to my partners, that we had 52 convenience stores and 3 huddle houses. On this property right here, the highest and best use for that 10-acre commercial, and back a quarter of a century ago, I was out of town. I had Mark Walton come to a meeting that they were talking about my property. And I had Mark make sure that they didn't forget about me out there, and that I had been told that that 15 acres up there would be designated as a commercial node. Well, Mark stood up and said, yes, Mr. C would like that as a commercial node when it was being discussed, and it's been a commercial node for a quarter of a century. Steve was in junior high school at that time. Steve called me in 1985 wanting to buy my property, and he sounded like some kid in junior high school. I told him I wasn't interested. I was raising a family there. I've sent 4 kids that graduated to Rockdale County. So I'm an old timer in Rockdale County. I had an equestrian facility out there for 20, 25 years, maybe 30 years. And as the demographics in Rockdale changed, the demand for an equestrian facility changed also. The country people moved further out, and the city people moved further in, and some of these city people, they don't even know what a horse looks like. So the demand for my equestrian facility went down, and we had a waiting list for years and years and years just to get in to my stables. And we had horse shows, we had auctions, we had everything out there. So it was a full-fledged business for 25 or 30 years. Now, on the 10 acres, not 15, which is on the land use plan, the highest and best use for that property is a convenience store on the corner. It's on the going home side. We have a congestion problem out there now. And one of the reasons we do have a congestion problem is people going south to Lake Jackson. They turn left to get into the existing convenience store across the road from my property. If they turn left, sometimes they hold up traffic going towards the monastery. If we have a convenience store on that corner, they will exit on the going home side to get their fuel, and every convenience store operator in the country always prefers to be on the going home side. They'll come into our property, they'll get their gas, they'll get whatever they want, milk, bread, drugs, whatever, pharmaceuticals. Then the people that's going to Henry County, which we want that tax base coming from Henry County into our commercial node there, I think that's good for everybody. They will turn right, come into our property, see farms, turn right on Oakland Bridge Road, and boom, they head to Henry County. We feel like, and I've been involved in buying property and looking at every angle, every problem, every good thing about it, every negative thing about it. We just know that we're going to eliminate some congestion at Highway 212 and Oglesby Bridge Road because of what we plan to build there. Now, I don't know if I'll build it. I don't know if we'll sell it to somebody. But the only thing I can tell you, it will be a first-class facility. My partners, I just talked to them 2 or 3 months ago. I talk to them all the time. Really, they're like brothers to us. The last station they built was $6 million. Believe me. This will be, if a convenience store goes there, whether it be we build it or somebody else builds it, it will be well lighted. It will be a place that you send your wife, your daughters into the restroom. The restrooms will be spotless. We'll have environmental lighting. It'll be a first-class facility. It won't be a gas station. Now, I have never built a gas station. I have bought gas stations and tore them down. I have bought gas stations and renovated them, but I've never built one, and I don't want to build a gas station. Anything I'm involved in or anybody we sell that to, if we don't do it ourselves, it will be a first-class facility, which will be nothing but an asset to everybody in the community. And it's just, it's just a fact. It's just a fact. It'll be less congestion. We'll get some of that Henry County tax dollars. And just like Steve said, we've got 92 customers in our back door of that commercial area. The last thing we want to do when we go out there and start building these 92 houses, we're going to tell them, hey, we're going to have a first-class 10-acre commercial node up here, and it's going to be something you can walk to get milk. it's going to be something that everybody is going to like. And it's going to be a positive to everybody in the community, not just our 92 customers we're selling to. So I just wanted to talk about that. We don't have a problem in the world with vapor stores. We don't want a liquor store there. We don't want pawn shop, because the people in Atlanta, they break in, they steal, and they don't pawn stuff a half a mile down the road from that store they broke into. They bring it into the suburbs, and then they pawn it in the suburbs. And while these thieves are out there, they look around and see if there's anything else they can pick up in our community. We don't want that. And it amazed me, all the people that's been telling me what I can do with my property that I've owned for 53, 54 years, they never mentioned pawn shops. And I'm thinking, if they did their homework good, that should be the first thing on their list. You don't want pawn shops in your neighborhood, because there's nothing but problems. You don't want adult stores in your neighborhood. These are the kind of things that we don't want, that even if everybody in here wanted it, we don't want it. So anyway, I just wanted you to know that I feel like a first-class convenience store would be nothing but an asset to the community. Anybody got any questions? I'll be more than happy to answer.
And this does not connect or have access to the subdivision?
Oh, yeah. They can walk to it, whatever.
Oh, they could walk to it, okay.
I own 140 and a quarter acres.
Okay.
We're building 92 houses on 130. So we got 10 acres left, which
Okay.
has been designated as a commercial node a quarter of a century.
Okay.
And everybody in the world, if they didn't know what was going there, all they had to do is go to the comprehensive land plan, and it says commercial node. 15 acres, not 10. 10's what we're applying for, and because we feel like 15 would be overbuilt. So any more questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
All right. Thank you.
When I built there, it was Ogilvy Road was a dirt road. And as people started moving out there, they started building on Ogilvy.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this was amusing. Everybody that bought on that dirt road, they turned around and they started complaining about, God, this is a dusty road. It would have been a dusty road for 100 years. That dusty road didn't bother me because I was raised on a dirt road. And evidently, they had dealt with all the people that had been complaining about wanting to get Ogilvy Ridge Road paved. And a guy called me from the county, I can't remember his name, it's been 45 years ago. And I was the last one he called to negotiate how much I wanted for my property. And I really thought this was funny, and because the people that bought out there on the dirt road, they complained about the dust. And then when the county said, okay, we'll pave it, then the county goes out there negotiating with these people, and they want an arm and a leg for their property. And he asked me, Mr. C, he says, how much can we negotiate with you on your property? He said, you're by far the biggest landowner. I think I got a couple thousand feet down towards the power lines, going down over the road. And he started telling me all the hassles he had had negotiating with those people out there to buy their property. They wanted an arm and a leg for it. I said, look, I don't care if you paved this road or not. I was raised on a dirt road. The dirt I bought out here was a dirt road. You can leave it as a dirt road. I don't care. But if you want to pave it and the county want it, you just take what you need. You don't write me nothing. I don't want nothing. And there was silence. He couldn't believe what he heard. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that was funny. Has nothing to do with what we're doing now, but anyway.
Right.
I did sort of think that.
Well, thank you.
Okay, good. So we do have some people signed up to speak tonight, but I did want to talk about the whole gas station. So during the Planning Commission hearing last week or the week before last, there was a long conversation about gas stations and convenience stores and that kind of thing. So what planning staff would like to recommend is that it be, if there is a gas station, that it be convenience stores without pumps. That's where we were headed, and did not put that into the conditions just so because there was such a long conversation. So if you have any more questions, let me know. If not, we do have 3 people signed up.
Is clarification, in the Salem Road overlay, we do have conditions for gas stations where the pumps are hidden. So
Yes.
it can be bermed in the front. It can be where the pumps are hidden a little bit. So is that also something that could be looked at?
It could be looked at to mirror what's in the overlay if we worked with the developer, but again, they're asking for C1. They're not asking for the overlay.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so are we ready to move on to
Yes.
public comment? So we have 3 speakers signed up to speak. We've got the first one that's in support. So I think we already heard from Mr. C. Unless you want to talk again. I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, it's your sign. Is this a trick? Okay. So, all right, I fell for it. Okay. The next one we have is in opposition, and it's Teresa Corbett.
Okay. Good evening.
My name's Teresa Corbett. I live in Manchester Subdivision, 1617 Claremont Lane. So last fall, we had a Zoom meeting with Mr. C and Mr. Goodsall on the whole property, the whole area that was going to be developed in or wanting to be developed into homes, and on the commercial. And during that conversation, when I say we, it was multiple people from subdivisions around there.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had about 8 total on that call. He being Mr. Goodsall said, please put a list of conditions that you want, that we wouldn't want to have certain things here, like say a tattoo shop.
Right.
So we spit out some things that we said we didn't want there. And I remember him saying something that people want experiences. They don't want to shop. You can get your stuff from Amazon delivered to your house. Kroger and Walmart can bring stuff to your house.
Mm-hmm.
So we want an experience destination. I remember that. So fast forward, we go into November, and that's the BOC meeting. And Ms. Washington, basically, this came up and talked about the conditions, and she said to a fella that was from our subdivision that my husband and I had never met before. He lives on another street, and he was talking about wanting to put conditions in. She told him, get together with the people in your subdivision and put a list together and email it to me. So my husband called him. They had a little meeting and spoke to the neighbors, and they put a list together and emailed this to Ms. Washington for the next BOC meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And was this presented to the developer?
Yes, it was emailed.
Okay, thank you.
So when that next meeting came about, I know he emailed it to her. It was never mentioned. And what ended up being mentioned was all of a sudden there was talk of no more, like a strip mall type thing. All of a sudden it seemed to be about gas stations. It's like the rug was pulled out from underneath us, because if you look at the 6th one down, what does it say? Residents also strongly responded that they do not want to see gas stations, mechanic shops, or oil change centers. So, now I'm going to make a correction to what was said in the last BOC meeting, because you were talking about the commercial around that area. I go there probably 4 times a week to that gas station. You want to know what's there? It was said that there's a gas station there, there's a gym, there's a print shop, a pizza place, and a hairdresser. Okay, the print shop closed early in 2024. It was only there for a year. The gym closed late spring 2024. That was there maybe a year and a half. The hairdresser has been out of business for 3 to 4 years. And I used to get my hair done there. I know this. So what happened was they left. The gas station did nothing with that area. And then probably about 2 years in, they made that exterior match the rest of the gas station. And they bust open and they put in gambling machines. So that is all gas station right now. So with me going up there so often, I'll tell you what I see. Sitting there waiting to get gas and things like that, I get bored. I go pick up some of the trash around in the parking lot. I've seen people pull up, get out, and urinate between the gas station and what was the old cleaners, that's where the print shop was. And just walk up, drop trouser, and go to the bathroom. Meanwhile, there's a house right behind there and a window. They don't care. I have gone on the side where that old cleaners was and interrupted 2 people having sex. Let's see, what else? The dumping of the garbage. They pull up, they have their meal, open up their doors, put their garbage out, full things of Big Macs and French fries and all that. So you want to build a gas station, that's what you're going to get. That's all I have. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have David. I apologize, but I cannot read your last name. Nash. Okay. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for letting me speak. I'm a horrible public speaker. I'll just say that up front. We live in the property directly south of Sea Farms. We have about 1,000-foot border with them. We have 27 acres. We've lived there 3 years now, I think. I live there with my wife, Deborah, and my son, Wilder. And we're very happy with the outcome with the residential development there. We're not so much invested in this development, but we are in agreement with everyone else that we don't really want to see a gas station. And I know a lot of the things you talk about, pawn shops, that comes under other classifications. That wouldn't even be talked about under C1, I don't believe. So the thing that we see here is that early on last year, in one of the meetings, I've been to so many, I can't remember which one it was, but again, he would say, even in that, I was in that Zoom meeting as well, that he would take community input and tell me what you want, and we'll try to abide by that. So we tell you what we want. She gave you the piece of paper that says that. And okay, that's great. Well, the last meeting, he comes up and says, well, no, I can't do that. I can't make money or whatever doing this and that. And so he wants to include the gas station. And we feel like there's a little bit of bait and switch going on here. And also, excuse me, I've completely lost my train of thought. Anyway, like I said, bad at public speaking. So we would just like to reiterate that we're against the gas station, and for the reasons already put forward. Thank you.
There's no more public comment. Did the applicant have a balance of time left? Would you like to address any of that? Okay.
Can I say one thing first? If there's anybody else that wants to speak and maybe didn't fill out a card, we'd be glad to still hear from them. I think we have a few minutes. Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to address the comments from the two folks who live in my neighborhoods, both of them. I'm glad to have been able to have developed something that came of service to them. We did have a Zoom meeting, and I did ask for, solicited, what would you want there, okay? And what I was looking for was a list of things that might be useful to the neighbors in the neighborhood to be part of a list of the things that we would go after. I also asked them what they didn't want, but I did not mean, and if I implied in any way, I didn't mean to say that anything that you don't want, we're not going to have.
Right.
I just wanted to understand where they were coming from. Gas stations, mechanic shops, and oil change places. I don't want any of those either. We want a convenience store where you can purchase gas, and the economics of convenience stores, which are today's general store. A lot of them are a lot more than, a pack of gum and a Slurpee these days. You can buy sandwiches there, you can get your milk, you can get your bread, but you can get a whole lot more. But the economics of those are made possible by the gas. And we can't hide our gas pumps and have a convenience store that sells gas. That won't work. What we can do is do a first-class, excellent store that's going to be an asset. So I'm sorry if anybody feels like we're trying to do anything there that we represented otherwise. I don't think so. We're trying to do the best thing we can. I did say we'd love to have experiential things there. We'd love to have restaurants. We'd love to have a lot of things. We got to do what'll work economically. We're going to search for things that the neighborhood wants to have and that they need and will spend their money at and make successful. That's what's guiding me as I look for tenants for this. And pleasing the neighborhood is pleasing my neighborhood that I'm going to build and pleasing other customers. So that's what we're going to do. I can't speak to the horrendous activity that she's seeing going on across the street. I can only say that what we would do would be have full up with security cameras, super well lit, and I think would not be conducive to some of those activities. It would be well maintained, well taken care of. I think everybody sitting here understands the difference in your daddy's gas station and today's modern convenience stores. Thanks.
I have a question. Did you get the list of suggestions from the neighborhood?
I did.
Okay.
And
Did you solicit any of these businesses or consider what they said, or you were already
we
set
we can't really solicit customers until we're rezoned, chicken and egg thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I solicited suggestions from a lot of other people, and it was awkward at the planning commission meeting. They kept talking about the conditions. There are like 5 sets of conditions from different people floating around here, and I've lost track. I'd love to say let's have no conditions. Nobody else in the intersection does. That's fair and equal treatment. But we're trying to work with folks and take off the table some things that concern them, like the vape shops and the liquor stores and so forth.
And I'll take the opportunity to say this. How many subdivisions have you built in the community?
30, 35 over a period of, this is my 40th year in the county. I wasn't in junior high school. I was 25 when I came here, and came in 1985 with Meadowbrook down in this neighborhood. Did Manchester across the street, did Southridge across the street. I developed a good portion of the properties that are down there. I'm proud of what I've done, and feel like they're good places to live to this day. I want to do more.
So I just want to make this comment. I think you've got a track record in Rockdale. I know a lot of citizens have been frustrated with the multiple townhomes and new builders in the community building 4 different places, 4 different sets of townhomes with no track record in Rockdale. So while I understand that you have built a number of subdivisions, I think between you and Mr. C, it makes people uncomfortable when they don't know what's coming, and a lot of this is a trust factor. So I know that I think I can speak for this board and say we want an aesthetically pleasing community, and to do that we want to expect the best, and the experience that you've brought for many homeowners in the community, I think that speaks to your credibility. But I will say this, there's a lot of pressure on the two of you to produce a really good product, should this pass.
We feel that.
Do you? I know you do. I've been to one of those meetings, and I saw that, and I felt for you. So that was a brutal meeting, I will say that. But anyway, just know that I think people are very passionate about where they call home, and they want the best for their families. And I understand that I, of course, live not too far from where this development is. So
I understand.
All right.
And appreciate that.
Thank you.
If I could address what Commissioner Smith asked about making sure the community knew what we were doing. August, September, somewhere along in there, Steve and I was talking, and we said, why don't we rent a space somewhere and invite everybody in the community and answer every question they got. There are no secrets. I learned a long time ago, you might think there's secrets. There's no secrets. Everything comes out in the wash. So we rented a place at Johnson Park. We had about 100, 110 people there. I put 75 chairs out. I got there earlier than Steve, so I put 75 chairs out. That's all they had. And all the walls were lined with people. So I'm just guessing there was 100, 110, 120 people. Steve got up and talked for an hour, answered every question in the world. At the end of the deal, I got up and told them who I was and blah, blah, blah. So we reached out. We did more than reach out. We went that extra mile, rented this place, and just wanted everybody to know what we were doing. And I lost my chain of thought also. Oh yeah, and also when Steve started developing all of these subdivisions around my farm, and I had you know, I talked to Steve, I'd say, I'm not interested now, but call me back in a year. I put it on my calendar, he'd call me back a year later, we'd talk for 30 minutes. I'd say, I'm not interested now, call me back in a couple of years. That went on for 15, 20 years. Every subdivision that Steve developed, I knew the day I bought that farm, 52, 53 years, it wasn't a farm, it was just a grown up wooded area. I knew I was going to develop that property one day. I knew that without a doubt in my mind. I just didn't know it was going to be 53, 54 years later. I figured it'd be a little sooner. You know, there's a time to cash out. You know, I got one leg in the grave now. I'm 80 years old. So anyway, it's time. All my kids have moved out of Rockdale, so it's time to sell or develop. We could sell it to somebody, and who knows what they would do. I wanted to be involved in that development. That's just not a piece of dirt for me. That's C Farms. Everything has always had my name on it, and it will have my name on it as we develop it. Every development that Steve did, and Steve had no idea I was doing this, but I figured one day, after talking, and there's not a developer on the east side of Atlanta that hasn't called me. I've never had my name on the property other than C Farms. I've never had a phone number out there. My name numbers have always been unlisted. But all of these developers on the east side, there's nobody that has not called me a numerous amount of times about wanting to buy my farm. Well, every development that Steve did, coming out of my front driveway, I looked straight at Manchester. And the other 4, 5, or 6 he's developed within my neighborhood, I've been through each one of his developments as he was developed to make sure that, hey, this guy is doing this in a responsible way. And I saw absolutely nothing with I don't know how many trips through the different subdivisions that I didn't think was responsible development. So when it got time for me to develop it myself, he's the guy I called.
Thank you. All right.
I hesitate to say we're done with that one. Are we good?
We're good.
Okay, so we're moving on to the last item that we have for tonight. It is item 3, and it's a future land use map amendment and a rezoning. And again, I will bring up Ms. Tugman.
Okay, item number 3, these two cases will be presented together, the flu and the rezoning. So case number FLU 2024-08 and REZ 2024-27. Site address is 4250 Southeast Highway 20. The applicant is John Nix. Mr. Nix is requesting to amend the future land use category from medium density residential to commercial and to rezone 12.88 acres from AR, agricultural residential, to C2 to allow the property to be developed with commercial uses, including a restaurant. The parcel is zoned AR and is surrounded by AR and R1 zonings, and the future land use is medium density. The parcel has road frontage along both Highway 20 Southeast and Christian Circle. The parcel is undeveloped and heavily wooded. And again, these two cases went before the Planning Commission November 7th, and the Planning Commission Board recommended denial due to the lack of transportation infrastructure. And on December 10th, the Board of Commissioners referred both cases back to the Planning Commission. Then on January 9th, the Planning Commission heard the request again and recommended approval with conditions. And I'll go through those in a little bit. And so with this case, they had made some significant changes to their site plan, including a reduction in the number of entrances from 3 to 2, a reduction of buildings from 3 to 2, a reduction of total heated square footage from 29,850 square feet to 16,000 square feet. So in summary, the applicant is requesting to amend the future land use map from medium-density residential to commercial, and to rezone the site from agricultural residential to general commercial for the development of retail complex. And the site will include 2 buildings totaling 16,000 square feet, heated square feet, 2 access points to the commercial complex, 1 access point from Highway 20 Southeast with a deceleration lane and tapers, 1 access point from Southeast Christian Circle, and the development will be served by septic system. The applicant is also proposing a 75-foot wide transitional buffer adjacent to the R1 zone properties, which exceed code's requirement of 50 feet. And they're also proposing 20-foot wide landscape strip along frontages of the development as required by code. All reviews were received from internal and external departments, and the Rockdale County and the Rockdale County Board of Education and Stormwater, there were no impacts. Water and Sewer Department states that there is an existing water main along Georgia Highway 20 and Christian Circle, but there is no public wastewater. RDOT agreed with the findings from the traffic impact study which the applicant did, and it states that certain turn-in movements at the intersection of Christian Circle and McDonough Highway will get worse with the new development, but not enough to warrant traffic lights, but does recommend stop signs. So based on the evaluation of the request, staff did recommend approval for both requests with 13 conditions for the rezoning part of it. The Planning Commission voted to recommend approval for the future land use amendment and approval with 5 additional conditions to the rezoning request. One thing to note is that the Planning Commission also voted to recommend C1 local commercial rather than having C2 general commercial for the zoning request. There are 18 conditions. Would you like for me to read those into the record as well, or?
I would like to, but can we take a minute just to ask questions as far as what you presented so far?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
No, I want to hear what are the conditions.
Okay. Just because I know you're going to present 18 on that list, can you talk about the roads? The road is going to, the exit will be on which arterial road?
The exit that Mr. John Nix provided, let me see if I can find those for you. There will be a dedicated left turning lane from Christian Circle to Georgia 20. And they're in the conditions as well, number 15 and 16. So, and the owner agrees, if it's approved, that for the GDOT to construct these left turning lanes and any dedicated turning lanes that once it's approved. So if we...
So also, Ms. Chair, the applicant will have this in their presentation tonight as well with the visuals, and it is listed in the 18 conditions and in the staff report, if that would be more helpful when we get to the applicant portion to this, because I don't think everybody can see this right here. I could take it up front while you're...
Okay. And one more question. So the 20-foot setback, I know that road eventually will be widened because it's 2-lane in front of this project, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And what's the setback for right-of-way for the expansion of that road?
It's the landscape strip, or...
So what is the, if GDOT came in and we had to buy rights to that property, what would the setback be so that it's not disruptive to the parking area on the plan? Do you know?
No, I'm not sure what transportation would require for that.
Mark said that he could answer that, so I'll
Right,
wait.
so, I'm sorry, Ms. Tugman. So, yes, the applicant could also answer that, and within the report through plan review that the art director provides, it would also be in that information as well,
Okay.
so.
Very good. All right. Okay, very good.
So go ahead with reading the conditions.
We can do.
You can do
Yes,
that?
thank you.
Okay.
If it'll, I don't know if you wanna
Expedite
make it
things.
verbal, but if it'll make it easier, we'll stipulate that the written conditions that have been presented in their report, with the exception of one, I think, because I don't know if the conditions in there about the gas station or not.
Okay.
Yes, the last one does
It
include
is.
that.
Right, and just to kind of play off what Mr. Nix was saying, it's not a requirement that the conditions are read into the record tonight because we do have them as a matter of record and on the screen, unless you want all 18 read
I think we
aloud.
better read them because I can't read that, so.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I see what you mean. So,
Yes,
okay.
teeny tiny font. So if we could quickly read those, that would be
Okay.
great. Making notes for, okay.
Yes. The last page of the packet too.
Right, they're in the,
Right.
in the packet as well.
Go ahead.
But go ahead. Okay. So recommendation number 1. The applicant shall abide by all applicable standards of the UDO for the C1 zoning district unless otherwise specified in these conditions or through approval of a variance by the Zoning Board of Appeals. Number 2, the applicant shall provide a traffic impact study prior to the submittal of an application for a land disturbance permit. Any recommendations for improvement shall be required to be shown on the land disturbance permit. Additionally, as determined by Rockdale County Department of Transportation, a new study may be required for the development. Any recommendations for improvements from any new studies shall be required to be shown on the LDP. Number 3, the applicant shall provide documentation of GDOT's review and approval of the right-of-way, driveway encroachment on Highway 20 with future permit submissions to Rockdale County. Number 4, the applicant shall ensure that the driveway entrance from Christian Circle has a center line aligned directly across from Fay Court. Number 5, the developer shall provide a lighting plan for the site. Number 6, no elevations or architectural renderings were provided with the submittal. Building shall be of brick, stacked stone, and/or glass finish on all sides. Final building elevation shall be submitted for review by the Director of Planning and Development prior to land development disturbance approval. Number 7, as indicated on the site plan, the developer shall provide a 75-foot wide natural undisturbed buffer adjacent to all residentially zoned properties. Buffers shall be replanted where parsley vegetated and shall be subject to the review and approval of the Director of Planning and Development. Number 8, the applicant shall provide a 20-foot wide land strip adjacent to all right-of-way. Number 9, no tents, canopies, temporary banners, streamers, or roping decorated with flags, tinsel, or other similar materials shall be displayed, hung, or strung on the site. No decorative balloons or hot air balloons shall be displayed on the site. Yard and/or bandit signs, sign walkers, and sign twirlers shall be prohibited. Number 10, outdoor lighting shall be contained in cutoff type luminaries and shall be directed in toward the property so as not to reflect into adjacent properties or right-of-way. 11, applicant shall provide proof of environmental health approval during the land disturbance permit phase. 12, all utilities shall be placed underground. 13, natural vegetation shall remain on the property until the issuance of development permit. And 14 to 17 is what the applicant had brought into us himself. So number 14, the total square footage heated for commercial buildings to be located on the subject property shall be limited to 16,000 square feet in the absence of the filing of a modification or condition and the granting of same. 15, a dedicated left turning lane from Kristen Circle to Georgia Highway 20 shall be depicted in the construction plans associated with the LDP for the subject property and shall be constructed by the applicant or its successor in interest in conjunction with the development of the subject property. 16, the owner agrees to request and seek approval from GDOT for the construction of the dedicated left turn lane from Georgia Highway 20 to Kristen Circle. If approved by GDOT, said dedicated left turn lane shall be constructed by the applicant or its successor in interest in conjunction with the development of the subject property. 17, the rear buffer of the subject along its eastern boundary lines shall be 75 feet wide with the exception of the construction, installation, and maintenance of stormwater and septic system infrastructure. 18 is the one that the Planning Commission, they've added to all of this. Local commercial uses shall be permitted with the exception of the following uses. 1, vapor stores. 2, liquor stores. C, dollar type stores. D, tattoo parlors. And E, gasoline stations. Those are the conditions.
Very good. Let me ask you about item B for liquor stores. We already have it in the code that liquor stores couldn't be built. So do we have to mention it again and things like this?
For the zoning that he has, it is a permitted use. So we just want to make sure that we put it in the conditions that we're now having it as a prohibited use because the neighbors have commented about that and they do not want it.
Okay, but our current code says they couldn't build one anyway. Correct? Because of
it does not.
Restrictions? Say it again. Okay.
But now it's C1, but also C1 and C2, it's both, it is a use that is allowed in C1 and C2.
I think that it's worth noting that since the Planning Commission was asking that it's a down zoning from they requested a C2 and then Planning Commission said C1. So we wanted to make sure that the liquor stores wasn't in case that they were granted the C2, I think is where the confusion was.
For the record, will you tell me, were the same planning board members on the board when they first voted it down?
Yes.
And do you know the vote for those 2 dates?
Well, the first one was to deny.
Yeah.
The second time around, it was approval with these conditions.
But you don't know the vote numbers?
Unanimously for the last one.
Unanimously
But we know some people who would know the vote. Okay.
Yes, okay, very good. Okay, all right, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Mr. Nix?
We're ready to hear from the applicant?
Yes.
I'd like to open by saying that whoever made the arrangement for who went first, they missed it. The headliner is supposed to go last, and the warm-up band is supposed to go first. We cannot match Good Soul and C in their combination. So I just want to lower the expectation about the energy. John Nix, Mark Walton, on behalf of the applicant. Just a little history. This site, 12.88 acres, has been undeveloped since it was a farm. That probably goes back 40 years. If you really look, you probably can find the old home site. So it's been sitting vacant, undeveloped for the entire time. It's been zoned AR for at least 35 years. At one time, my law partner owned it with another gentleman who they actually sold it to the applicant. There's no connection as to the applicant hiring Mark and I for this, but it's just a coincidence. But I know it was actively marketed for 30 years. If you know Robert Maddox, you know that he would not let it sit idle. But it remained not purchased. So we have an undeveloped site surrounded by residential. It has a future land use map designation of mid-residential. If it was ever going to be residential, it would have been residential by now. I mean, the market would have driven it to that. So we're presenting a use that we think makes sense. When you look at our site plan, remember when we started our journey, we were looking at doing about 28,000 square feet. We've reduced it because of the concerns of the neighbors in half. When you look at our site plan, you see it's a 12.88 acre site. We're using the front part of it. We've got 50 foot of required buffer. In the special condition, you see that we suggested we've added 25 feet to the rear. It's wooded if you go out there right now, so that 75 feet now would remain undisturbed, with the exception in the 25 feet, if it's needed to clear something to accommodate the drainage, the stormwater and or the septic, we'd make those disturbances, but nothing else in that 75-foot buffer. And the greatest concerns about the buffer have come from the property owner to the rear of us, and that's what we put in to accommodate that. The other two big conditions I think that we've added to this that make sense is we understand the traffic. The traffic study came back and said it doesn't warrant a signal. Our client is willing and prepared to do the dedicated turn lane on Christian and negotiate with DOT in order to get a left turn lane on Georgia 20. We wrote the condition the way we did because we're committed to do that. It's not if DOT will do it, no, it's if DOT will permit us to do it, we will do it. And quite candidly, both those improvements make sense for the owner too, right? Because it eases transportation in and out, which is a benefit. I won't take a line from Mr. Goodsoul because I can't sing it as well as he did, but this will be a Class A development. This particular owner does these things across metropolitan Atlanta. It'll be Class A. Unfortunately, I know the homeowners do not want there to be a gas station. And remember, our code is a little funky on that verbiage. It doesn't say convenience store with gas pumps like you see a lot of places. It says gas station with convenience store. And then you have to look at the 13 stipulations that go with a convenience store, a gas station with a convenience store. And the reason of that is because when we wrote the ordinance to not allow truck stops in Rockdale County, the person that wrote it, not me, was very clever and decided to rewrite about gas stations so he'd close the loopholes where you couldn't convert one of those into a truck stop, because we were trying and that's why you see the references at the very end about truck stops. So it was rewritten, and that's why it's just a little odd. I'll let Mark talk about anything he wants to bring now because we'd rather just reserve the rest of our time for rebuttal.
Basically, you all hopefully have a copy of each of the site plans. Again, I'm Mark Walton. The chair had asked questions if the road was widened in the future. That would be a DOT thing. They could pretty much do what they want. But typically, like on Sigmund Road, it used to have a 100-foot right-of-way. They wanted 10 additional feet on each side. So even if they went 20 feet on each side, we will have a 20-foot landscape strip. So if they took that entire 20 feet, part of that would be a shoulder and slope that the DOT would do. So they would not have to pay for parking. There wouldn't be damages to the property owner that were extraordinary unless they decided to do an 8-lane road. But simple widening, 20 feet should be sufficient. And other than that, if you have any questions, we're here, or we'll sit down and be quiet.
I did want to address one thing that you brought up in the other application, and that's whether or not the sale of overlay conditions about buffering the pumps from visuals. We would, I'd have to talk to the client, but we would definitely consider applying some of those conditions to this site. I mean, we just borrow them from the Salem overlay and put them on
Right.
the site, because he does want something that's aesthetically pleasing. That's why we're not pushing back on having the finish on our buildings 4 ways around, because typically that's not what you have to do, but we're not pushing back on that. And I think he would consider some of those as part of it that we could discuss prior to y'all's vote to add as conditions. So
Okay.
I just wanted to open that door.
Okay, that would be great.
So I do have a question. So it says the owner of this property is 1618 Land Holdings LLC. And you mentioned that they have developments across Metro Atlanta. Do they have, I'm wondering if there's a development similar to what they would want to do here that I
can
could
give
go
you
look at.
examples of.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get you that.
Okay.
I will talk to him tomorrow and email staff with places.
Okay.
That would be great. That would be very helpful.
I have something to say. I would like to add making green space part of the conditions. If possible, also retain the vegetation, some of that vegetation in that buffer that's there, and not remove all those trees.
Well, the buffer to the rear, that will be undisturbed. The
Okay.
50, and we're adding 25 additional feet. And the only thing we would do in the 25 feet is if there, we know that detention is going to be on the plan's not up there, but on the Christian Circle side at the back. But that wouldn't be in the buffer. But it might be in the 25 feet to a certain degree, so we would work around that, but maintain the rest of what's back there without disturbing it. And then we don't think that our septic is going to go back that far, but if it has to go back that far, there would be a disturbance in the 25 feet, not the 50 feet, to accommodate that as well.
Okay, I would like that condition.
And I do know that in my interactions with citizens in that area, they're very concerned about the alignment with Fay Court. Is there a way that it could be designed to come a little bit closer to Highway 20 so that it is?
It could be designed that way.
Okay.
But for traffic reasons and safety reasons, it's much better if they align directly across. That way, you don't have somebody exiting out of the gas station, turning to the left, or to the left, heading towards Newton County, and somebody coming out of Fay, turning to the right, and, conflicting with one another.
Okay. On this plan, instead of this exit,
Yes.
there may not be enough stacking room, but is there a possibility of coming closer to here for an exit so that turn lane here would kind of leave some protection around this neighborhood and those back there?
We can certainly, that can be a condition as long as RDOT and GDOT will allow it. I would think that
Okay.
would be an acceptable condition.
Because I think because of the proximity to the traffic light close to there, it's not a mile distance, so GDOT wouldn't approve a light
No.
there. And if you did entrance exit here and here, that too would be a problem with GDOT because of the traffic load, correct?
Correct. They would rather have sort of where,
It's high
the one on Highway
priorities.
20 sort of centered, and then that way it gives us the room to create that left center turn lane. So when cars are heading south on Highway 20, there'll actually be a left turn lane into the site so that it's not impeding other traffic that's heading to the south.
Okay, all right, thank you. We're good.
So since this is two applications, there's 20 minutes allotted for public comment on this item tonight, and we have 3 people signed up in opposition, and the first one is Kelly Manning.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I wrote down my notes here because I knew I would forget something and then I'd be mad at myself the rest of the evening. So, my name is Kelly Manning. My husband and I live on the adjoining property, so we're directly affected by this. David and I have lived here in Conyers for over 30 years. When many of our friends and family left the area, we opted to stay and raise our family here. I even brought my business into this county. We are community volunteers, taxpayers, and business leaders and want Rockdale County to thrive. We are obviously biased in the proposed property as it directly affects our way of life. However, it affects all of the community. The property is surrounded on all sides by single dwelling homes and families. We do not need nor want any commercial development that close to our families. The speed limit on Christian Circle is 30 miles per hour. Sorry, I'm a little, and people easily do 50 plus without this increased traffic. Our mailbox has been taken out at least 3 times. 2 cars have been in our neighbor's front yard, and there was a fatality on this property just a few years ago. We do not want this increased traffic. And let's talk about traffic. My office is 8 miles from my house, and often it takes me 30 minutes to get home. Highway 20 is not equipped to handle this new development. If you travel on Highway 20, you will realize you get backed up at Honey Creek Road, then again at the light at Christian and Cowan. There is no way they'll put another light, which you just mentioned, and that close in proximity to Christian and Cowan 1. And without one, getting on and off Christian Circle will be nearly impossible. It almost is now. We have been to many meetings on this issue and having meetings with Mr. Nix and his associate. While I realize his interest is in his client's development, I truly thought he understood our position and empathized with us. I now realize that was just a ploy. Never in any of this discussion was a gas station brought up. But at the planning session a couple weeks ago, he sprung that on us. When I confronted him after the meeting about that never being mentioned, he told me that was intentional, as one of the previous board members had an aversion to them and he didn't want to hurt his case. Mr. Nix is out for Mr. Nix and not for Rockdale County. Yes, this affects me, but it also affects every person driving down Highway 20 and all of my neighbors on Christian Circle and the surrounding neighborhoods. I realize them leaving this as a green space is not an option, though I wish it was. There are so many families of deer and other wildlife that will be destroyed. I think we must be choosy in what we allow. We do not need another gas station. We have 21 within a 5-mile radius. I run on empty 90% of the time, and even I can afford to go 1 more mile to get gas. We do not want the traffic that comes with that, the noise and light pollution, the crime, and overall aesthetics. We do not need vape shops. There are 3 in just the Honey Creek Center. My husband emailed each of you with our pleas, as well as what we don't want to see in this property. I trust you received that and will take it into consideration. I can also tally up all the empty buildings within 5 miles and get that information for you. It's staggering. Our plea is this. Please don't let these developers and lawyers turn Rockdale County into Memorial Drive. Stand up for the people who went to bat and helped you get elected. We believed in you and your goals for our community. Please go to bat for us.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Where is your property in location to this? On the very back?
We are right here. Right here.
Okay. Does the movement of this driveway at all affect your thought?
It'd probably actually make it harder to get off the road.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is David Manning.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, yes, that was my bride, not David. Okay. I'm not going to.
It's double time right now, right?
I'm not going to
Okay.
repeat what she said. I'm going to just try to edify it a little bit. You know, some of the previous, of course, I agree with what she said and the point she made. And some of the other applications that I've heard since attending some of these meetings, there's a lot of talk about consistency with current zoning. You know, it's a fit, that sort of thing. And that's one of the points I try to make here when I have been speaking in opposition is we're talking about putting this type of commercial development, if you will, that's surrounded by residential. I mean, you look at the highway this way, that way, across the street from it, it's all residential. It's inconsistent. If it ever was a point of inconsistency, it is in this case. And this would be on the going to work side of the highway, not the coming home side, which does make a difference. And I can't resolve in my mind how traffic's going to be handled by Georgia 20 for people coming home in the evening and wanting to turn left into these businesses. They're talking about potentially a turn lane for Christian Circle if we're trying to get on the Christian Circle off of Georgia 20. But nothing, I don't think, in terms of getting into the property left-hand turn. And right now, just people turning on Christian Circle, just like Kelly said, backs it up to Cowan Road and then back to Honey Creek. So I just can't resolve in my mind how that's going to work. The extra turn lane and queue that they're mentioning on Christian Circle would help, but we kind of effectively have that now because people turning left off of Christian Circle to go south on Georgia 20 are in the lane, and those of us wanting to turn right just kind of go on the shoulder, and we queue ourselves up to the right of them. So it's effectively that's there now. That I don't see that being that great of a impact on it. Obviously, with my property adjoining that, and we've been there for 30 years, and don't get me wrong, when we moved there 30 years ago, it was what's going to be put here. And even then, our first thing, as long as it's not a gas station or a quick trip, as a sucker as I am for the roller grill, I'll drive to get roller grill as opposed to having one I can walk to. I don't want that. But the gas station development was what we feared most. Okay. Now, the first concepts that we saw, and we met with Mr. Nix and Mark, and they were very cooperative with us. We had some meetings with them, looked at early concepts, and on this, on this plan here, the early ones, about almost this much was shown to be this was going to be undisturbed green space. But that was appealing, okay, because there's a lot worse things that could go in here. But now it's that's changed a little bit. I understand there may be retention ponds.
Oh,
Mr.
I'm sorry.
Manning,
If you'll go back there so that public at home can hear you.
That way we're streaming this meeting and people can't hear if you don't
At
speak
home.
to the microphones.
But anyway, some concerns about it is all undeveloped standing timber now, and there's some concerns about what's really going to be left when all of the sewer and that sort of thing. And if I can, I won't speak.
Okay.
I apologize. Anyway, the letter on this is what was
Okay. Thank you.
But this photograph I provided you is a picture that I took this afternoon. That's 75 feet from that property to my house. That's what it looks like. It sounds like a lot, but it's not. Whereas before on the previous concept, there was quite a bit more, like the back third, I would venture to say, of the property was going to be left undisturbed, potentially. It was just a concept, I realize that, no promises.
And this is 75 feet from to the edge of your property?
Yes, not to the house, to the property line, but the property line's into that a little bit, away from my house.
It's like an optical illusion from what I see here, maybe. Okay.
Right.
All right.
And look, south of Rockdale is different from North Rockdale. I'm not saying it's any better. It's just different. There's a character about South Rockdale. We kind of characterize it as rural, the rural part of the county, if you will. We like that lifestyle, where business are appropriate, and like the previous applicant was saying, that edifies the community. Those 92 houses will probably appreciate having something. That's what I feel is appropriate. But we like our way of life down there. If we need to eat, if we need to go retail, we'll drive uptown, do our business, and then drive back to our peace and quiet. There was a list of things that we kind of do not want, and I wanted to share. I had made some suggestions before, and this is what I would consider something possibly acceptable to the residents around there if it's got to go commercial. Professional buildings such as that.
So this would be more like an OI designation or mixed use, right? Which would be like a transition between residential and Okay. All right, very good. Thank you.
But, let's see. I apologize, let me check my notes, I just want to not leave anything out. Yeah, that's about it. I mean, I wanted to cover some of the, what we consider the good points. Most of that's covered in that letter I provided and did email, and I asked that you please review that. Our contact information is there with questions, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and the last speaker is Mary Margaret Mitchell.
Thank you very much for letting me speak tonight. My name is Mary Margaret Mitchell, and I've lived in Rockdale County for a very long time. My husband's lived here even longer. He and his family, his parents moved here in the late 70s. He went through elementary, middle, and high school here. I moved here in 1986 with my parents, and my husband and I are still here out of the two families. Our children went to Barksdale Elementary. We live on Fay Court. That is the road that would be lining up with what they want as the back exit for that building, or the service entrance, I believe is what they had said in another meeting. And I can't stress to you how much we do not want that building or that zoning to change. I understand that gentleman has a right to sell it, but we would just request that it stay the AR, the agricultural residential. There wasn't a neighborhood that was just built, so this is the land that they're talking about right here, the 12 acres that goes here. There's a neighborhood right on this side. It's called Stafford Glen. It's a beautiful neighborhood, lovely individuals. When this proposal was put up, I went from house to house in that neighborhood one night after I got off work, and I spoke with a lot of people, and this was one of the meetings back in the summer or the early fall. But they were all very much against this as well. This affected a lot of them, especially the people on the side of the land that it is adjacent to. And I can't say how much we don't need just another piece of another strip building going in. You can go anywhere. If you go down 20 on the way to that building, if you just go down there, if you've never been down there and you go down there to drive and say, let me see what this land is about, you will pass multiple little strips that are partially to mostly empty. I can give you an example. For instance, so 20's here. If you turn right from Christian Circle, so that plot of land is right here. If you turn right and you're going back towards Honey Creek, there's a little strip mall that has a dry cleaners there. That dry cleaners is the only one in that little strip mall, that little strip right there. There was another store. I think that store is now gone. Behind that little strip is doctor's offices. A lot of those are empty. There's a couple that are still there, but a lot of those doctor's offices are empty. And then you move right on over, and then you're at the corner for the intersection of Honey Creek and 20. That intersection that has the amazing Mexican restaurant. I'm not plugging the Mexican restaurant, but it's great. One of the, that there's a lot of little stores in there that are empty. We just don't need another strip. And I cannot stress that enough. It's not elevating to the community. It just looks like, you're trying to just, for profit. How much are you invested in it? Are you living here? Are you here with all the other people who are wanting to have a good life, who are wanting to have a good aesthetics? Wanting to elevate the community. Like I said, we're still here in Rockdale County after a very long time. And, we are concerned about our neighborhood, or about the areas around us, and we just want what is best. And if you leave this little corner and you turn left and you go past the liquor store, which is literally a quarter of a mile, if that, from this little from this plot of land that they're wanting to sell, if you pass the liquor store, right past that, on the corner of 20 and Oglesby, there's a big strip mall back there that used to have an Ingles. The Ingles is no longer there. mostly now. For the longest, the only thing that was there was the Goodwill on the far left and then the Dollar Tree on the far right. And there were 2 restaurants there for a while, but eventually those went out of business. And then all of the area between those 2 stores was just empty. Now they have storage units there now. But again, this is nothing that's elevating. This is nothing that's going to be, promising for the community. I just don't like nothing to be built. I understand the gentleman, the people that own the land have a right to want to sell it or make profit off it. But my request is that it stay AR, agricultural or residential, and to try and find someone to buy the land to develop housing. Because like I said, Stafford Glen is a beautiful house or a neighborhood, lovely people that live there. But we just don't want to see another strip. And that's just what it's going to be. No matter what they say, how well they're going to make it look, it's just going to be another strip. And we really, really, really don't want that. I have children that ride their bikes and ride their scooters on Fay Court. And we just had another couple with a teenager move in, young person. And, this is not edifying for us. I know there are certain counties around us that have issued some moratoriums, and I would say I would love to hear that from Rockdale County. We just need to put a moratorium on building because, we don't need it. We just don't. If you want to build, let's build roads. Let's build schools so our schools aren't overrun. Barstow Elementary was great for my boys. We loved it. We could not do virtual education, so they had to go to private one in 2020. But we loved Barstow while our boys were there. The teachers were wonderful. They made good friends. And I just think we need to think about the community as a whole and not about the person that can make some money off selling a piece of land that's his right, it's his land. But keeping it the designation that it is now, the AR. And my husband, Zachary Mitchell, wasn't able to be here tonight, but he did email, I think all 3 of you, his concerns about the property. And we just can't say how much we don't want that to be built. And I understand, like I said, it's his to sell, but if you have to, keep it the AR. That's my only thing. Thank you, ladies. And we're very glad to see you, Commissioner Smith, and Madam Chair, very much on the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that completes public comment. Did you want to use the balance of your time? Okay. Okay.
It's tough to be in either position when you come before when you come before the Planning Commission. It's rare where there is not a difference of opinion about the use of a piece of property. As you all know, and as you work into the position from a long absence and as a newcomer, there's a lot out there to absorb and a lot to take in. And I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know, but the state of Georgia has a zoning procedure law. The zoning procedure law dictates to counties and cities that when they enact and empower their zoning, they have to follow certain standards in order to decide whether something should or should not be rezoned. You codified that in your ordinance, and the staff reviews those conditions and addresses them. They make us as applicants address them and say what we think about them. It is not enough for the public to say they don't want something because of aesthetics. And believe me, I was raised by an architect. Aesthetics are something that I see, and I don't even want to see them sometimes because things just pop out at me and say, why didn't they do that? I remember having those conversations with my father. He's probably laughing at me now. But it's not aesthetics are very, very important. But that in and of itself, and I don't want it because it's forest land right now, is not enough to carry the burden to meet what the state requires you to do. This property has been vacant for over 40 years, zoned AR. The newer residential development, if I'm standing in front of the property to the left, I wonder why that they didn't acquire this property at the time, because I can assure you, when they developed it, Mr. Maddox was trying to sell it to them. So there's a reason why they didn't buy it, and maybe it just didn't fit their plan, right? That's more property than we want. But to this day, with all the residential around it, this property sits what? AR, vacant, undeveloped. So we come with a plan. We're asking for C2. As we go through the process twice, it comes to pass that the staff staff eventually, and probably wanted to do it initially, say, let's go for C1. That's a condition now of our zoning. We're not pushing back on that restriction. We're not pushing back on compacting what we can do on the property. We get it. We get it. Much like Mr. Goodsell said, it's more of a neighborhood as opposed to a more intense commercial use. Anybody you talk to, he made the argument for me, Mr. C, a gas station, a convenience store without gas is not viable. I don't know if there's going to be a gas station with convenience store. We did not depict it in our schematic, our conceptual plan, because the developer doesn't know. Because guess what? And we already had 15 minutes of this from Mr. Goodsell, and I say it with respect, it's what the market's going to drive.
Right.
It's what the market is going to drive. So it does matter. There are vacant properties of commercial up and down in our community. They exist. But if a viable, experienced developer says, I can make this work, and they're going to invest multi-millions of dollars to make it work, it's not a condition to review as a zoning matter whether or not it's viable from a market perspective. The market's going to drive that. Now, you can say it's too much traffic, you can say it impacts schools, you can say it's environmentally not correct, you can say it doesn't fit with our zoning plan, you can say all those things and go through those 7 or 8 conditions and make your decision that way. But you can't decide it because there's some vacancies up the road. You can't decide it because you don't think it's viable from an economic position, because that is not one of the conditions that you're supposed to consider. It's a good argument, it's a great argument, but doesn't apply to what we're here before you today about. It just doesn't apply. If that individual is going to go invest $4 or $5 million on this site to make it something because he thinks the market will drive it, he's going to do it. If he can't, then he's not. But to limit his uses and take away a convenience store and gas from him is a viable option as he decides what the market will drive. It is putting too much restriction on it simply because there's too many gas stations. We took away the uses that people really opposed, and I get it, and we had no issue about taking those away. But if you're going to change the zoning on this, you got to recognize where it is today, and what he's trying to do is get a product that's viable. He didn't come in here and ask for M1. He didn't come in here and ask for, we couldn't have an adult bookstore because we'd have to be an M1 or M2. But it's a rational, reasonable use. And we got a staff report that supports it, but oh my gosh, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this. The first time in 2 years I've come before the Board of Commissioners with a recommendation from the Planning Commission. And whatever they ate that night before the meeting, Mark and I are going to find out what it is, and we're going to give it away every time we come before the Planning Commission. If I didn't know the history of this property and how long it's languished, if I didn't know that this developer is a good developer, and the concessions that we've made, and we're never going to make enough concessions, never, to satisfy people that enjoy what they're enjoying now. And I tip my hat to them. It's great what it is today. But it's not going to stay that way. At some juncture, it's going to change. And at the very minimum, as we go out of this process together, I just wish you would consider what they said. It's important, but also consider it in the context of what the actual burden is for the county to consider whether or not a zoning is appropriate or not. That's all I'm asking you all to do. Just follow the law, because the conditions are there for a reason, and they've been around for a while, and they're important. So thank you.
So I do have a question on the 75-foot buffer.
Yes.
How much of that is going to stay undisturbed?
We have to do 50, right? The
Okay.
25 that we're adding to the rear not just for his property, but that whole long line on the back, we're going to leave it undisturbed unless the location of the detention facility that Mark would be part of has to creep into that 25 feet. We disturb that portion if it has to, but if it doesn't and we can keep it out of the extra 25 feet, we won't disturb it. The same
Okay,
way
so the
with,
extra 25 feet, is that nearer the buildings or nearer the property?
it's stacking on top of the 50. So it goes.
So there's
the code requires
the
50.
line of the other residents.
That's right.
And then there's 50 that must be
The
undisturbed.
code requires 50,
And,
and then we're going to add
and
25.
so you're talking about 25 more that could have.
And to be honest with you, I don't know if the code requires it to be undisturbed. It requires it to be planted. What we would like to do, because it's a good stand of trees, is leave it undisturbed to maintain what is there now. And then we added the 25 feet. We didn't have to add the 25 feet. The code doesn't dictate that to us. The photograph that shows, hey, this is 75 feet from my line, oh my gosh, that's close. Well, the code says it only has to be 50 feet. We're adding 25 feet. So we're exceeding the requirements of the code, and we're saying in the condition as we wrote it, we'll only disturb the 25 if we have to do for those two limited purposes, the septic tank and the detention pond. The detention pond has to go where the detention pond has to go based on engineers. But we're going to do everything we can to avoid disturbing anything else in that 25. And hopefully, we don't have to go there. But that'll be dictated by how it works out on the site. And y'all know how long it takes to design something like this and go through the LEP process. So it'll all be vetted. And I'm sure staff will be watching us on that to make sure, we'll make a commitment to, and we did in our condition. We said we will stay out of it except for those two reasons.
Thank you.
All right, so the burden for the county. Tell me, so this rendering doesn't have anything to do with a gas station.
That's correct.
So it makes me then question the landscaping that's here, which would be a further protection for anything back here from a visibility standpoint. Optically, it would be better.
Okay, well, if something, and this truly is an if something became a convenience store with pumps, we can commit that the same visual landscape would be applicable to it as well. In other words,
Okay.
they're not going to change. Well, we'll make that as a condition. We show landscaping around the entire perimeter of what is developed out of the ground. We'll make a commitment that, and we can talk to staff about how to write it, about depth, but we'll make a commitment to have landscape as depicted around the totality of whatever comes out of the ground, the structures, whatever it is. And that is the intent.
So with this plan and the question of the zoning, there's no step down zoning between residential and C1. So
you could have O&I.
You could have O&I,
You could have O&I,
mixed use.
Well, I don't know if they put mixed use down this way, but
They'll put C1. Why wouldn't they do mixed use?
well, mixed use has a lot of other elements.
Okay.
And O&I simply further diminishes any viability because of the whole situation that's going on now, and who knows where the trend's going to end about having office space and coming into work. I talked to the client about Mr. Manning's idea about medical offices and institutional, and it's something that he would, if he thought the market would allow it, he'd love to do that. I mean, not love, he didn't say love. That would be viable to him. But he doesn't think in the current marketplace for the next several years that O&I is something that's feasible. So he'd be going for a zoning that's going to put him in the same place he is in today, vacant property for the next 4 or 5 years.
So I know down past the Ingalls Shopping Center because it is 2-lane all the way down. Traffic is pretty horrendous in the afternoons. So because of the GDOT requirements for a light, it does bring into question the flow of this traffic and the problems it creates. You can see right there in front of Kids Are Kids, if there weren't a turn lane going into Honey Creek, traffic would be much longer. So now people stop to turn left and there's a long wait, so people will circumvent and go on the right side, which is the turn lane into Honey Creek, to go around. And so you're going to have the same bottleneck down a little bit further with this type of project, even with the Christian Circle exit.
Okay, and what Mr. Manning had said, that we didn't have a left turn going into the site, we do. That drawing depicts that there'll be a left turn. So as you were describing, in front of Kids Are Kids, as you're heading south, everybody has to pull over into the decel lane
Correct.
for Honey Creek. Well, instead of doing that, we will have a left turn lane that the people that are heading south merge over to the left turn lane, turn left into the site, and the people that are heading south have a straight through lane that does not get altered.
So I guess it's not depicted, in my opinion, maybe not
Yeah.
well here.
Okay.
So you're saying that this far left next to the property, you're going to cut into the property. I'm confused by how you think there's room for 2 lanes plus a center lane. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's a northbound and a southbound, and when it's done, there's going to be a northbound and a southbound, and in the middle, there'll be another lane created that turns left into this facility. And the owner has also said that he's willing to try to seek approval from GDOT to do that also, continue that left turn lane down to Christian Circle, that would be a wonderful thing for all the residents on Christian Circle.
Which would give how much stacking, would you guess?
Probably 8 cars, maybe.
GDOT's going to make us make the one left turn lane.
Right.
We're just trying to get their permission to extend it, and that if they granted that, we would pay for that extension to Christian Circle.
And explain to me the burden you feel the county has to change the zoning for this. When he bought it as AR, he obviously knows the law and is familiar with planning and zoning. He could have done this 20 years ago. He could have done it 10 years ago. Why now?
Who?
The
Our
owner,
well,
Bob
he's the
Mack.
new property owner.
Oh, he's the new property
He
owner.
purchased this property about 2 years ago, I think, maybe 3 years ago. So, yes, he knew what he was buying when he bought it, right? But what he was buying, if he is sophisticated, is he's buying a property zoned AR that's been zoned AR for 30-something years. And when he thinks the market is right, maybe to get a zoning, perhaps if he's really sophisticated, he thinks I might have a chance here because it's been that way for so long. Now that's just one tiny element, y'all. That's not. There's lots of elements, but maybe the price. I don't know. Maybe the price was right too, right? Because the prior owner had held it for 30+ years.
But we already know we have a horrendous traffic issue down there. So
Yeah.
adding to it creates more issues of safety and concern for
Right.
residents and visitors in that area.
And zoning case law will tell you that traffic in and of itself is not a sufficient, and obviously defer to the county attorney, but traffic in and of itself is not sufficient typically to deny a zoning.
What
You have
about
to-
the fact that there's no step-down zoning and what your request is for?
You mean we're not asking for O&I or
Correct.
R3 or R2?
Correct. Nothing that transitions from residential.
Well, based on most of the comments that have been presented to you, even though there seems to be a lean toward O&I, because probably there's not a gas station involved, or maybe something else.
Well, it would be a step down.
Well, there's nothing between C1 and residential other than OI.
Correct.
And I would state to you that this property zone OI would have, in this market, and probably in, in this market, has no chance and no viability, but.
So let me clarify what was said earlier, is that we have a ton of vacancies for commercial right up the street, and we have vacancies for some O&I. So to me, it's just as viable as what you're offering.
Yeah, but it's whether or not we heard ton or some. And
Either way, you both know there's plenty of open retail and some office.
Well,
So why as a board would we want to support no step down between residential and commercial?
I think it's based on location. I mean, you've got 13 acres here, and typically you do a transition right if you can. You go from residential to something less, and then all the way to step up to C2. The only step down that's going to occur here is going to go from what it is today to O&I, and that'll be it. So you'll have O&I, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a viable use?
That wouldn't necessarily be my concern.
Well,
if it's AR, there should be some transition. Otherwise, what's the point of a land use map if you don't follow it?
well, in this particular case, I say the land use map is wrong. Well, I would not stand in front of you and say it's wrong every time I come in front of you, but obviously, no.
Really? Come on. Okay.
I'd have other arguments, but my primary argument here is the fact that this property has been the way it's been probably for 50 years.
But it's not been marketed or requested anything other than AR. There's not been another historical application for O&I.
No,
20 years ago, 5 years ago. That's right. So how can you really say that there's not been an opportunity?
Because I would say that if the market demanded this site for existing use or even residential, it would already be off the market. Because 13 acres like this would not sit in the middle of this residential as a vacuum if there had been demand for that site for residential. For whatever reason, and I know, well, I have personal knowledge it wasn't the price, which I probably wouldn't have in any other case. There's a reason why this hasn't been purchased for residential. And maybe the reason, I don't know what the reason why is. Part of the argument is traffic, right? Well,
sure.
Well, maybe traffic is so in that scenario, then we just leave it like it is. And we leave it natural.
Correct.
And that would be absolutely wrong to do.
To leave it residential?
No, to leave it like it is, AR.
Right. Why would that be bad?
Because it's proven through the history of the property that there's no taker for the use as it sits.
Well, you could say that. You could also say you have an inactive owner who didn't have a correct agent to market it. You could also say that they never tried to market it under OI because there's not been an application for an OI in the history of the property. So
where was the history on the C property that they marketed OI? And they weren't referring to a future land use map. They were referring to I forget what it was. It was like a long range. It wasn't, well, let me put it this way. It was a plan for zoning in the county, but it never got zoned for a commercial use under the land use map because they had to modify the future land use map as well to get that zoning. So when we hire somebody to do a study, they say, okay, here's a perfect node for commercial pop. The zoning itself never got changed to reflect that. So similarly to the C property, we have property that is designated AR, never had that magical node designation by some study group that did it 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Didn't have that, but certainly didn't have the future land use map designation either. So that got lifted out from AR, out of to C1, having to change the future land use map, having to change the zoning, having no history of marketing it. In fact, having a history of saying no, 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 no to somebody that wanted residential because he didn't want to do it at the time because he had that great horse farm going. I was familiar with that. So we're similarly situated right there. What we don't have going for us is we don't have decaying commercial across the street from us. And no one can argue that what's across the street from C Farms is not decaying commercial, given the description of what goes on in the parking lot, given the description that half the businesses are gone, and it must not be much of a convenience store because they took the rest of it so they could have gaming machines. Correct. So that please, Mr. C, build something across the street and maybe you'll finish this off. But we're both being lifted up out of the same place.
I would disagree.
No?
And here's why. Because you have other corners already on the land use map as commercial around there. And you don't in this situation.
That's true.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Okay.
if we
That's the
could-
last of my 10 minutes.
Okay.
So if we could speak into the microphone, please.
More.
Yeah.
But I'm
There's viewers at home.
I'm done now anyway.
Okay, well.
It's time to make my exit. Any more questions?
No, thank you.
All right.
I'd sincerely appreciate, Mark does too, y'all's attention and your questions. We do appreciate having questions and being asked about issues. So that means y'all are being thoughtful about it. So thank you.
Thank you. All right.
So that was the last item for tonight, and we have nothing else.
All right. Thank you. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. Thank you for your attendance and comments. I appreciate